Excellent. Really great to see you. So we'll give a big smile on three. On three, we'll all say Miller's Burgers and give a nice little smile, and we'll take a screeny. So 1, 2, 3, Miller's Burgers. Excellent. Thank you, everybody. That's great. I'm sure we have a few shots in there, so we're all good to go. I want to welcome Greg McCormick and Jason Darmanovich to give us updates from stuff that's happening around the Mojaloop ecosystem. I'm sure most of you are curious and eager to learn about updates from Microsoft's little excursion into the Mojaloop world. So Jason and Greg, I'll hand it over to you guys.
Thanks so much.
Thank you. Okay, so first off, this has really barely been started. So there's not a lot to say. It's mostly just informational. I'd really like to keep out of what will inevitably be the avalanche of technical questions at the end. Did ask Jason to sit in with me just in case it got deep and over my head, and he's actually the person who's really running this. So the goal is, this was announced at the last convening, is to take Mojaloop and make it a first-class citizen on Microsoft Azure in multiple ways. And I'm gonna do something that I don't normally do, but I realize there's a lot of new people, so I'll do kind of an about me real quick. So first off, I volunteered to do this. Microsoft's pretty busy. I'm the Chief Strategic Development Officer at Cybrin, the Mojaloop, the open source transactional monitoring solution, RegTech, and all of our public good initiatives report up to me. I'm also on the technical governance board and the community council member, product council, marketing, etc. So just, wanted to throw that out there because I don't think that's been done in a while, and then we'll get off me real quick. On the agenda here is basically Mojaloop on Azure. Why is it important? A little bit about the project organization, the scope, and the work completed and the work in progress at the moment. So I pulled this straight off of the Microsoft Azure website. That's what these graphics are from. Why is this important? Here's just some of what you can do with Azure, right? Test and deploy enterprise apps, massively scalable. All these different customized services that you can tap into, all the data insights that are available. And yes, other cloud providers have this too, but this is something that is available with Azure. And by placing everything on Azure, then all these options become available when working with Mojaloop. So the other things, I've got 3 things at the bottom. We'll reach a lot more people. If it's on Azure, if it shows up in the marketplace, people can try things out. They can just push a button and click and deploy. Basically, there's a lot more options as far as the deployment and what you can do, and I'll get into that in a little bit. And we do get a lot of validation of what's going on with the product set, just because we're kind of re-going through everything with a different purpose and a different direction. And we'll wind up with a lot of artifacts that come out of this that are back, given back to the community, that frankly is paid for by Microsoft. They're funding this whole initiative. Microsoft's been great. We personally have 2 different things going on with them. There's this focus, and then we also have another focus with a large bank, that Pan-African bank, that we don't have the ability to publicly disclose yet, but most people know who that is. There's a virtual team there. We're actually directly contracted with that customer, but the virtual team is that customer, ourselves, and Microsoft yet again. So we're getting a lot of enforcement around getting everything on Azure and getting everything, I don't want to say right, it's not getting it right, but getting it very Microsoft centric and Microsoft focused as far as supporting things. But this is what I think the biggest thing is great ideas come from access, right? So and then they lead to innovation, and you have this ability with the Azure platform to basically just click, and there's the low cost free tier and things like that. And these are things that haven't been available to us So the ability to, yes, we do have a sandbox environment, but the ability to give somebody some sort of fintech or innovator a quick start into playing with Mojaloop is I think a huge plus. So basically, the generic scope of this, and I'll get more into the detailed scope in a minute, is, we're going to make it a first-class citizen on Azure. We're going to make it work with Marketplace, and we're going to make it with the Azure stack. The stack is something that is really important if we think about it. A lot of countries have data residency issues and requirements. So with the Azure stack, it's basically a hybrid model. We can drop devices into country and run them in country, and yet manage them from the cloud. So this would take care of that requirement. And I, for one, am very excited about that. We've placed that up in the priority of order as far as something to work with. Some things do not run in the stack, so we have to figure out what can run in the cloud, in the full Azure stack, what can run in the stack that's deployable in country, and then what of all of that can work within the marketplace, so someone can push a button and walk through prompts and get something set up. So the goal is also to optimize performance by leveraging everything on Azure, and really the goal is this whole ease of installation and management. So for anybody that is familiar with working with the Azure cloud, they should be able to sit down and work with Mojaloop. Now, obviously, when you get into scheme setup and scheme decisions and stuff like that, that's Mojaloop specific, but we can take care of the technical side of getting something up and running. So we wind up with ARM templates for multiple purposes. And then basically we're going to be able to leverage that Azure management portal for both, for deployment and management and alerting, reporting, and things along those lines. So from a project initiation standpoint, we started in December, but due to the holidays, it really started in earnest in January. The virtual team has been onboarded and is inside in Azure DevOps. Everything's being run in Azure DevOps. All the management will be done there first, the repos, the wiki, the pipelines, but we are conscious of the fact that a lot of this is going to be open source components, and that we need to move them to the official repos and the documentation. But we need to worry about movement of the ARM templates just to be available in Azure, and everything that's available in the marketplace. So there's kind of a multi-faceted thing, but we're going to take care of everything within our own environment first, and then move to these other places. The internal project cadence has been established, but we need to hook up with the external community, and all that needs to be figured out, and that's a priority. So from a scope standpoint, I literally copied this from Jason's scope in the wiki, so I totally plagiarized him here. As a first step, we're going to set up an OSS baseline set up in AKS, and that's already been done. We did notice we used the latest Helm charts. There was some adjustments that needed to be made from an Azure standpoint, and that's all stuff we'll work with the community and share. Stateful components, we'll basically work to use the native resources, right? So how can we use, for example, Kafka on event hubs? Because then we're paying by message structure in a more affordable way. We don't even know if this can be done yet. So we're going to be looking at all those types of things, because the event hubs does in fact have the Kafka API layer on top of it. So we'll be checking all that out, or HD Insights, which would be the more expensive way to do that, but we'll be looking at that. The Percona MySQL is being replaced by the Azure databases for MySQL, the database as a service component. The scripting phase one, basically it's how do we make that all work in a deployable manner? How do we start to separate these things and pull them outside of the current clustered environment that's set up? Then there's the API management. The goal is to use the Azure API Manager with MTLS, and we'll have that as the ingress controller for AKS as an alternative to WSO2. in scripting phase 2, we'll be adding scripts to automate the work carried out with the API management components. And then on the DFSP authentication side, we'll work with towards a way to have DFSP ID insert validation policies to authorize the participation. On the testing toolkit, we're not really sure what needs to be changed there, if anything needs to be changed. There's probably some additional things that will be needed, but we need to work that out as of yet. On the phase 3 scripting components will be all the IAC work, and then the documentation will come in. As a stretch goal, we would like to work with application insights, but we're not sure if that's going to fit in there. And on the documentation, I should say, we also have a lot of documentation that has to be created for Azure, as far as how this would work, what exists on a marketplace, all the Azure style guides. So this isn't necessarily just documentation that comes back to the community. It's things that are required for Microsoft Azure. We did look at Terraform. There was some talk about, if we do work with that, obviously we're generic in our approach to IAC. But remember, this is an Azure first project using Microsoft tooling, so that is what the goal is. The goal really is to make this simple for someone who's familiar with the Azure environment and Microsoft customers, in general. And then also the other goal is to utilize the Azure cloud native services so that costing can be flexible. And for example, that's the goal with the message hub and things like that. So that said, a lot of work that comes out of this could be reutilized from a Terraform perspective, and we could utilize that, maybe in the future. We are going to be working with the MS Marketplace team. All that's being set up at the moment, and the goal here, like I said, is that one push, find it on the marketplace. It could be some fintech that's just looking for a switch to work with, and now it's going to be in the marketplace and highly visible. We're going to have the one-click deployments, the prompt advanced deployments, and then purely scripted deployment capability. So anyone familiar with Azure can deploy this, beginners, and anyone gets all the normal Microsoft support and infrastructure and guidance that comes with Azure. So basically, it's the goal is, I'm trying to think of how to phrase this. I almost want to say in the big leagues, that's the absolute wrong way to phrase this, but basically getting a lot of exposure and having it fit into that environment natively. Work completed to date. The Azure DevOps is set up and complete. The virtual teams have been onboarded. The initial plan created. The scope has been decided, as we just went through that at a high level. The current Helm charts have been updated with the OSS baseline. It was a single cluster environment, and the Helm charts are working with the native CLI. There were really only a handful of issues, and it just got a summary here showing that all the assertions and everything worked out. Work in progress, and this has probably changed already. This was from a couple days ago. Things like the Nginx retrofit, the ingress issues, as we start to swap things outside of the clusters, switching to the Azure native stateful components, modifying the Helm charts to point at the Azure database as a service that's in flight. I wouldn't be surprised if that isn't actually already done. And then the Kafka is probably the next big thing that needs to happen, because again, it would be wonderful if we could make it work with the Event Hub, because the pricing models would be much better than with HD Insights. And it may very well be that neither one of these work well, and we just leave it as it is right now with inside the cluster. Jason's working heavily on the end-to-end Azure infrastructure design that's in flight, dealing with all the security design of the base components, the network design, and the K8s design. So what we really need to work on next is how we work with the community, so that we need to get set up with everybody. They need to be, the community needs to be in sync with us, and we need to be in sync with them. Mostly this is a Microsoft thing. It's really a non-official, work stream, at least from their perspective, because there's a lot of commercial aspects to this as well. But we need to be tightly aligned. In particular with the DevOps folks, if we do need any shims or adjustments to the code, we need to identify that as early as possible and discuss that with the TGB and the DA. But the intention, frankly, is not to do anything that will create a fork. So this really is, it should mostly be a DevOps project heavily, which is why Jason is leading the effort here. And that's kind of the goal. So with that, I would open it up to any questions that anyone might have.
I think, Greg, maybe we should start tackling the questions in the chat.
Yeah, sorry, I can't see the chat.
Sorry, say that again?
Oh, I was just saying I can't see the chat. So
no, it's
yeah,
fine. I'll take it. Brian, you asked, does the Azure Stack use existing? So basically, Microsoft's approach is give us space for racks, and then they'll drop racks with however many units they deem necessary for the implementation. The changes to the Helm chart so far, we just had to change some API endpoints because when we were using the Helm charts, we were still referencing some beta APIs, and we just had to change those. Nothing too significant. Pedro, I've never used vNext. What else is there that I should be covering? Yeah, that's basically it. And an update, we are already using MySQL Azure Pass as of yesterday. We're moving on to the Kafka component.
Yeah, and Pedro, see your message, and I saw that in your vNext presentation as well. So was happy to see that. We're hoping just with this that goes pretty well.
Thanks, Greg.
And then I guess a follow-up on this then. So it sounds like the changes that were made were to endpoints and things that's expected at this stage. But as I understand it, the V14 release is now parsed apart the infrastructure dependencies from the core code. Would you anticipate changes being necessary in V14? Miguel believes not, but I'm not sure if you guys have studied that. You're I presume you're working on 13 now, V13 or V12?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, like what? Yeah. So that's the question. Like, what version are you starting with now, and do you anticipate moving forward?
I think the Helm charts we're making use of is V13 still. I stand to be corrected.
That can't be unless they're ones that don't come from Miguel or I, because they're actually just in early phases.
No, V13 is good because that is the current official release. Tom,
I'm sorry, I thought somebody said V14.
The last commit when we pulled those Helm charts, they were 6 days old.
Yeah, no, V13 is the current release, so that's good. 13.0.1 is the current latest release of charts. The main difference, once again, is V14 is going to introduce, well, by design, it's completely separated from the backends. And the other big change, obviously, is better support for new versions of Kubernetes and support for things like Containerd and all that kind of jazz.
Yeah, so we're running on the latest version of Kubernetes provided by AKS. I don't have it written down with me. Brian, for Azure Stack costing, I've heard numbers. There's also rentals, but I think it'll be best when Microsoft joins one of these, they can maybe give us an explanation on how that costing works.
Yeah, it's for example, the kind of pizza box stack, the basic one, which I don't know all the numbers on. They've been giving me numbers like it's $700 a month rental, but I don't know how much horsepower that gives us or what can be done. There's 3 different flavors of things. There's also a scenario that works on your own bare metal, but that has less options. So these are things we're really just getting started here. So we'll have better answers on a lot of that stuff as we go forward. yeah, on the community members joining and contributing to the virtual team, I would imagine that answer is a yes. I'll talk to Jason Gregory about that. One of the reasons, I mean, we're using their stuff, right? So it's not like they're paying any cost to add people into to the Azure DevOps and things like that. But the intention was to meet with people on a regular basis and set up a regular cadence with the folks that we need to, so that we all stay in alignment.
So on the infrastructure, and on that point, how's the infrastructure, the Kubernetes stack, the networking, and all the Azure infrastructure? How's that being put together? Is Terraform being used for that, or is there a different set of tooling for that?
No, not
right now we're sticking with traditional ARM templates. We have a penciled in meeting with the marketplace because we're going to need them to guide us on what they want us to use, because obviously they have standards and patterns for these sort of things. So they're going to be helping us make a decision on what that is. Besides normal ARM templates, obviously that's the basis of where we start everything.
Okay. So how do you see this coming together with the infrastructure as code and other things then where that is Terraform based?
I think it's too early to say. Once we have more clarity from Microsoft's internal marketplace team, we'll be able to make a better decision. That's why we sort of left we didn't leave it out. We've left the IAC component to further down the line, once we've met with all Microsoft's internal teams, because we also have to go through the stack team. And yeah, from there, I think at the next convening, we'll be able to give you a better answer.
Yeah, that was Thomas.
Yeah, it's Tom Daly here. I'm particularly interested in this area and actually available to contribute. But one of the reasons is because of how much this actually does for security and how much using AKS actually cuts down on the risks, and basically the Kubernetes supplier, in this case Microsoft Azure, just takes 70% of the security risks and onus away. Hence my question about IAC and I guess about the operations framework.
Yeah, we just don't have a solid answer on that. Keep in mind, this is why I say this is kind of a non-official work stream. Microsoft is paying for so they're going to want this to utilize their their components, but they're very conscious of the fact that it needs to run everywhere and that Terraform is going to fit in. So it may be that although we don't fork any code or anything along those lines, it may be that we just have an alternative set of installers. We just don't know, or IAC. We just don't know the answer to that as of yet.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, and I'm not pushing the Terraform barrow as much as I am how do we get those security benefits to come back to the IOC and other parts of the platform.
Sure.
I think it'll be good down the road at some point. So, the blanket approach would be swap in a Microsoft Azure service for every service that currently exists in Mojaloop. But then we need to understand, based on how Mojaloop uses data, how it transacts, how it pushes things around, and how it has to be deployed, what's the scaling cost if you are actually going to do this in a real deployment at scale? And there might be a reason why Microsoft's database implementation or their messaging hub or something else just scales poorly because of how they chose to monetize data interaction and how
correct.
Mojaloop works. Also on the messaging hub versus Kafka, you'd want to look at, Kafka isn't just used or historically hasn't just been used to push data as a message, so it's got to be looked at. How does the platform use that piece of infrastructure, and then is there replacement? Does it do all of that, or does it just do some of the stuff, or that kind of stuff?
Yeah, the full API is there, but we don't know what might fall apart. and trying to use that. The nice thing is the way that's costed. It is costed on a message basis, so that could become a very affordable thing. So we're going to place some serious focus around figuring that out. That would be ideal if that works. One of the things I wish we had, and like the application insights, we'd like to fit that in there, but we're basically as far as doing any profiling on performance that's really nitty gritty. We're mostly with the logs and whatever else Jason and team can get to an additional level. But it'd be nice to have like in the last presentation, what we did with the FRM stuff, with the transactional monitoring, we can literally see every single delay, how everything runs. If we could get something like that, or to that point, that's where the application insights would at least somewhat take us. That would be ideal, because then we can answer all those questions, Brian. As far as, is there, this is the way Microsoft chose to, install MySQL and use it. So is it better, slower? What are we doing? I know for a fact that the way Amazon implemented that is pretty impressive. And they did an awful lot of stuff to increase the performance, right? So, but I don't know that about the Microsoft side. So we'll have to see.
I would think we could compare at some point some representative just out of the box implementation running on AWS, for example. And here's kind of how it performs. Here's the footprint you would need to do X, and here's what this would cost if you did that every month for a year. And then run the same test on Azure and see, is it in the right ballpark, or is something kind of scaling out into the weeds?
Yeah. And that's the kind of stuff that's definitely going to be beneficial that comes from here, because a lot of what we need to make to do this on Azure is reusable, at least in part, for other platforms, frankly. So it'll give a leg up towards doing things like that.
So here's one idea, for instance, from community. I'm working with a girl doing the V14 chart update, right? Which is just Helm work. It's nothing to do with code. But Miguel has separated out the services of staff, anticipating that they need to be able to be deployed separately. So I could easily move from my K3's environment to actually developing the V14 actually on Azure. I registered for my free account a while ago. Had to re-register the other day. I've got my Azure cluster up and running. Yet, you get a 4 CPU node with enough with the memory is going to be tricky, but that won't work. But pretty much I could do that. That might actually have benefits across both community and for the Microsoft project. Just an idea.
Yeah. Well, what we need to do, Jason, we really need to make it a priority to plan, and I'll talk to Jason Gregory about this, to get the plans for, when we start to interact with the community on different things. And as far as resources and stuff like that, you'd think we'd have all but unlimited resources. They've allocated a certain amount of resources, and Jason's also having to do a lot of scripting around bringing things up and down so that we can conserve what we have access to. As is normal, everybody created a budget for this. Microsoft's being very flexible and very helpful on what they're doing. So yeah, Tom, we should look at what we can do together.
I do think so, but there's a convergence point, which is the output goal here is that this is sitting on Azure Marketplace. And so the presumption is you find a pocket of commercial community that's interested, say in Ghana or in Gambia, and they want to go and take a look at this. They can literally go to Marketplace with their SI and create an environment, which was, I think, the original intent behind the K3S deployments was, I need a way to just look at the stuff. In a narrow environment where performance doesn't matter and I'm not trying to cost anything. I just want to have a look at it. And so if we said maybe the K3S going forward is less important, I don't know that that's true. You guys may decide that's not true, but it may be that we put those energies and resources into creating that same experience, but now, in this Azure Marketplace-like environment, especially if if it can be done within the confines of a free account.
I think you need both, and that's why I had Lewis and I did Miniloop, but we dropped the cloud component. It's so that it can be as drop dead simple as possible, but not everybody can run it on a cloud, but everybody could actually run it. Others might be able to run it locally. You need both for the
I see.
suppliers.
Fair enough.
Yeah, so early days here. A lot of progress is being made, quickly. But next steps, we need to set up the coordination with the community so that we're all in sync. And then, Jason and team just need to keep cranking it out. It's going pretty fast. Like I said, I was expecting the MySQL stuff, as Jason said, to be done when I pulled the status out of DevOps to do the slides was a day or two ago, so that you can see how fast this is going. Any other questions?
No question, but yeah, I definitely look forward to that interaction. And I think you guys having input into the new version 14, and even if there's improvements to the existing V13, that would be awesome if you guys could contribute that stuff. So yeah. Thank you very much.
So I think we give you back a whole 10 minutes here.
Yes, 6 minutes. Thank you so much, Greg, Jason.